Welcome to Still Science Lab. Tonight, we will explore a profound, deeply unsettling mystery as we investigate the weight of light and uncover exactly why gravity bends the massless. I invite you to take a slow, deep breath, let the immediate, heavy friction of your daily life fall away, and allow your awareness to drift outward, far past the thin, blue atmosphere of our home world, and deep into the freezing, infinite expanse of the cosmic dark as you rest in the quiet sanctuary of your room. I want you to imagine the most fundamental, elusive entity in the entire universe. Picture a single, solitary particle of light, a photon. It is born in the blinding nuclear furnace of a distant, ancient star, violently expelled from the chaotic core and cast out into the absolute, lightless vacuum of deep space. From the exact moment of its violent genesis, this photon begins a lonely, unbroken journey across the cosmic ocean, and it does so with a characteristic that defies the heavy, dragging reality of our daily existence. The photon is the ultimate cosmic ghost. It is entirely, flawlessly devoid of physical mass. If you were to somehow catch this spark of ancient starlight and place it upon the most delicate, hyper-precise scale ever engineered by human hands, it would register absolutely nothing. It possesses no weight, no substance, and no physical bulk. It is a pure, unadulterated packet of raw energy, a fleeting ripple in the electromagnetic field that carries the visual data of the universe without ever taking up any physical space within it. Because it is completely unburdened by the dragging anchor of mass, the photon is granted a terrifying, beautiful privilege by the foundational laws of physics. It is allowed to race through the freezing dark at the absolute maximum speed limit of the universe, traveling at an unfathomable 186,000 miles every single second. It does not accelerate, and it does not slow down. It simply exists in a state of eternal, maximum velocity, slicing through the empty void like a silent, weightless phantom, completely untouched by the heavy, mechanical friction that governs the lives of biological creatures. To truly understand the staggering paradox of this cosmic ghost, we must abruptly pull our minds back from the deep void and look down at our own hands, at the heavy, physical reality of our own bodies resting in the dark. Throughout the entirety of human history, our fundamental understanding of the universe has been entirely dictated by our biological experience of weight. From the moment you took your first staggering steps as a child, you have been locked in a continuous, exhausting negotiation with gravity. We are taught, both by our science textbooks and by the aching muscles in our own backs, that gravity is a massive, invisible tug-of-war between heavy things. It is the language of mass speaking to mass. We intuitively understand that the colossal, dense sphere of the Earth is casting an invisible tether outward, physically grabbing onto the heavy rock of the Moon and swinging it around in an eternal, silent orbit. We know that the blinding, unimaginably massive core of the Sun is constantly pulling on the Earth, keeping our entire world from flying off into the freezing dark. This is the physics of common sense. It is a universe of ropes and pulleys, of mechanical forces reaching across the void to violently drag massive objects together. In this intuitive, heavy logic, the rule is absolute. The heavier the object, the stronger the pull, and the more violently it interacts with the gravity of the world around it. But this deeply comforting, mechanical framework creates a catastrophic contradiction when we turn our eyes back to the solitary photon racing through the dark. If gravity is strictly a mechanical tug-of-war between heavy objects, if it is fundamentally a force that only acts upon physical mass, then our cosmic ghost should be completely, perfectly immune to its grasp. A thing with no mass cannot be grabbed. A thing with no weight cannot be pulled. By all the logic of our biological intuition, a photon should slip through the immense gravitational fields of stars and planets like a fleeting thought passing through a solid, unyielding wall of stone. It should travel in a perfectly straight, unbroken line across the entire expanse of the universe, completely indifferent to the heavy, sprawling galaxies that it passes along its ancient journey. But when we look up into the deep, ancient gulfs of the night sky, the universe delivers a terrifying, mathematically undeniable shock to our common sense. The light does not travel in a straight line. It bends. When the ancient light of a distant galaxy passes near the heavy, blazing mass of a star, its path is visibly, measurably warped, curving around the star before continuing on its journey to our telescopes. And in the most extreme, violent corners of the cosmos, where dying stars have collapsed into the bottomless, terrifying depths of black holes, the paradox reaches its ultimate, fatal conclusion. A black hole possesses a gravitational pull so immense, so incomprehensibly violent, that it reaches out and swallows the massless photon entirely. The light falls into the dark, completely incapable of escaping the crushing grip of the abyss, never to be seen again. How is this possible? How can a black hole reach out and grab a cosmic ghost? Why does the ancient, massless spark of the universe bow to the heavy, dragging will of a star? This profound, irreconcilable anomaly is the fatal crash of our localized intuition. The bending of the massless photon is the universe explicitly, mathematically telling us that our entire understanding of reality is a localized illusion. The invisible tether of gravity, the mechanical tug-of-war that we have believed in for centuries, simply does not exist. To solve the paradox of the photon, to understand why the light falls into the dark, we must be willing to completely discard everything we thought we knew about the heavy, pulling forces of nature. We must abandon the comforting, mechanical universe of our ancestors and step into a reality that is far more terrifying, immensely stranger, and infinitely more beautiful. We are about to strip away the user interface of gravity and expose the raw, underlying architecture of existence, diving headfirst into the magnificent, mind-bending truth of space-time. To sit quietly in the heavy, fragile silence of your room and deeply contemplate the paradox of the massless photon is to undergo a profound, entirely irreversible philosophical awakening regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental flow of abstract information. We walk through our brief, sunlit lives heavily burdened by the arrogant, agonizing delusion that the forces which bind us, the heavy friction that defines our struggles and our limitations, are active, malicious agents reaching out to hold us down. We inherently believe that we are independent entities walking across a flat, passive stage, and that the universe is constantly throwing invisible ropes around our ankles to pull us off course. We view gravity, both the physical force holding us to the earth and the metaphorical weight of our own existence, as an antagonist, a mechanical burden that must be fought, resisted, and ultimately conquered by our sheer willpower. But the beautiful, curving path of the cosmic ghost actively proves that the universe does not use ropes to bind its creations. The cosmos dictates that the forces determining our trajectories are not reaching out to grab us. They are simply the invisible geometry of the world we inhabit. If even the massless photon, the purest, fastest, and most untethered packet of information in existence, is profoundly guided by the heavy presence of the stars it passes, then we must accept that nothing in the universe is truly isolated from the architecture of its environment. The light does not fight the gravity of the star. It flawlessly, beautifully yields to the shape of the dark. It demonstrates that you do not need to possess heavy, physical burdens to be deeply, fundamentally connected to the massive, shifting reality of the cosmos. You must realize, as you feel the steady, comforting weight of the air around you and the undeniable pressure of your body resting against the mattress, that the heaviness you feel is not a tether pulling you into the earth. It is the profound, mathematical proof that you are intimately, seamlessly woven into the very fabric of existence. Release your desperate, arrogant demand for a reality that is flat, simple, and entirely separate from your physical form. Abandon the uniquely human delusion that the forces guiding your life are mechanical traps designed to restrict your absolute freedom. Embrace the glorious, heavy truth of your absolute integration into the curving, shifting geometry of the universe. Find a deep, unshakable, and profound peace in the humbling, magnificent knowledge that just like the ancient, massless spark of light traveling through the freezing void, you are not being dragged against your will, but are simply, perfectly following the beautiful, flawless curves of a reality that was specifically shaped to hold you in the dark. When we seek to unravel a mystery as profound and deeply unsettling as the bending of massless light, we must first force ourselves to confront the foundational myths we have constructed to make sense of the dark. To understand the true, terrifying architecture of the cosmos, we have to recognize the invisible cages of our own perception. For centuries, humanity rested comfortably within a universe defined by heavy, mechanical certainty. We looked down at the familiar soil beneath our feet, observed the unyielding, mathematically precise fall of a heavy apple from a resting branch, and we looked up into the freezing night sky to trace the silent, sweeping, and eternal orbit of the moon. Driven by the brilliant, organizing mind of Isaac Newton, we wove these two vastly disparate events together with a single, invisible thread. We built a magnificent, clockwork reality in our collective imagination. In this deeply intuitive, deeply human framework, gravity was understood not as a geometry, but as a profound, physical tether. It was an invisible, stretching rope that reached across the terrifying emptiness of the vacuum, actively and aggressively dragging massive objects toward one another. We built an entire global civilization and an entire philosophical worldview upon this absolute assumption. We looked at the sprawling galaxies, the burning stars, and the wandering planets, and we did not see entities resting in a shifting fabric. We saw heavy, iron spheres locked in an eternal, mechanical tug-of-war. The rules of this classical universe were elegant, strict, and entirely unforgiving. The heavier the object, the thicker the invisible rope, and the more violently it pulled against the world around it. This paradigm felt deeply, unquestionably correct because it perfectly, flawlessly mirrored our own localized biological struggles with weight and effort. Every time you lift a heavy stone, Every time your legs burn as you climb a steep hill, your biology reinforces the Newtonian illusion. Your brain translates the friction of the world into a story of invisible forces reaching up from the dirt to actively pull you down. We must deeply acknowledge the breathtaking brilliance of this mechanical worldview. It was a triumph of the human intellect over the chaotic static of the unknown. Newton's grand architecture allowed us to chart the heavens, to predict the slow, wandering paths of the planets with staggering, prophetic precision, and to eventually build the heavy, metal machines that would carry our fragile biology into the shallow, immediate waters of our own orbit. He provided humanity with an exquisitely accurate ledger of the cosmos, a strict mathematical language that could perfectly calculate the tension of the invisible tether. But lurking right beneath the surface of these beautiful, balanced equations was a vast, terrifying shadow. The deepest flaw in this clockwork universe was not a failure of the mathematics themselves, but rather the agonizing, hollow silence of their origin. Newton could flawlessly calculate exactly how the invisible rope of gravity acted, but he possessed absolutely no idea what that rope actually was. He had deciphered the strict behavioral rules of the cosmos, yet the fundamental mechanism, the actual physical substance bridging the millions of miles of empty, lightless space, remained a complete and utter void. It was a physics of ghosts, a mathematics of action at a distance that offered no mechanical explanation for how a dead rock could reach across the vacuum and violently grasp another. And it is precisely within this theoretical void that the entire mechanical architecture begins to violently fracture, completely collapsing when confronted with the ultimate cosmic ghost. In a universe strictly defined by heavy objects pulling on other heavy objects, there is absolutely no mathematical or physical language to explain the behavior of a photon. The massless spark of light, racing through the freezing dark at the absolute speed limit of reality, does not possess the heavy physical anchor required to participate in this cosmic tug-of-war. According to the strict, unyielding laws of the mechanical universe, light should be completely, perfectly immune to the grasp of gravity. The invisible ropes have nothing to grab onto. The mechanical gears have no teeth to catch the fleeting energy. A photon should slip through the immense, crushing gravitational fields of supermassive stars and dense planets like a fleeting, untouchable thought passing through a solid, unyielding wall of stone. It should travel in a perfectly straight, unbroken line across the entire expanse of the universe, completely indifferent to the heavy, sprawling galaxies that it passes along its ancient journey. Yet, when we peer deep into the ancient gulfs of the night sky, the universe delivers a terrifying, mathematically undeniable shock to our mechanical common sense. The light does not travel in a straight line. It bends. The heavy, classical math of our ancestors goes completely, deafeningly silent when faced with the curvature of a massless spark. The Newtonian framework, for all its immense predictive power and historical glory, was fundamentally blind to the deepest, most energetic phenomena in the universe. It was an incredibly successful, highly localized theory masquerading as a universal, absolute truth. To understand how human intellect could be so brilliantly right and yet so profoundly, fundamentally wrong about the nature of reality, we must reframe our entire experience of classical gravity. The mechanical universe of invisible tethers, dragging weights, and pulling forces is not the actual physical reality of the cosmos. It is simply a highly localized, deeply comforting user interface. Imagine a staggering, incomprehensibly complex computer system. The brightly colored icons, the smooth, sliding windows, and the simple, neatly organized folders on the glowing screen are not the actual computer. They are a simplified, graphical illusion designed explicitly to help a biological user interact with a terrifyingly complex underlying architecture of raw data, shifting algorithms, and microscopic electrical currents. You do not need to understand the binary code of the motherboard to drag a file across the screen. Classical gravity is the desktop interface of the cosmos. It is an evolutionary shorthand, a simplified, practical set of rules that is perfectly, beautifully adequate for navigating our daily, low-speed lives on the surface of a single, rocky planet. When you drop a heavy glass cup and watch it shatter on the floor, the user interface of your brain tells you that an invisible force reached up, grabbed the glass, and pulled it down. It is a highly effective, functional illusion that keeps us alive, allows us to build towering bridges, and helps us throw projectiles with deadly accuracy. But this interface is entirely, fundamentally blind to the true, underlying source code of existence. It completely breaks down and crashes when we attempt to apply its localized logic to the extreme, high-energy environment of deep space, or to the absolute, blistering speed of a massless photon. To sit quietly in the heavy, fragile silence of your room and deeply contemplate this massive disconnect is to undergo a profound, entirely irreversible philosophical awakening regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental flow of abstract information. We walk through our brief, sunlit lives heavily burdened by the arrogant, agonizing delusion that our localized, sensory experience of the world is the absolute, unvarnished truth of the cosmos. We inherently believe that the way our physical bodies feel weight, the way we struggle against the immediate friction of our environment, is the exact same way the ancient stars and the sprawling galaxies operate in the freezing dark. We mistake the simplified, brightly colored icons of our biological interface for the raw, terrifying mathematics of the cosmic motherboard. But the silent, bending trajectory of the massless photon actively proves that true information, the deepest architecture of reality, operates on a level that completely ignores human intuition. The cosmos dictates that the absolute truth of existence is not something you can touch, feel, or conquer with mechanical force. The universe is not a machine constructed of ropes and heavy gears. It is a profound, shifting geometry of pure information. The illusion of the pulling tether demonstrates that our biology is desperate for a universe that makes mechanical sense, a universe that mirrors our own physical limitations. But the universe is under no obligation to be understood by the fragile, wet software of the human brain. Please understand that as you feel the steady, comforting weight of the air pressing against your skin and the undeniable, solid friction of the bed beneath you, that you are currently resting entirely within a grand, localized illusion. The gravity you feel is a shadow, a simplified translation of a much deeper, more beautiful mathematical truth. Release your desperate, arrogant demand for a reality that perfectly conforms to your limited, biological common sense. Abandon the uniquely human delusion that the physical forces of your daily life are the absolute, reigning masters of the infinite dark. Embrace the glorious, heavy truth of your own perceptual blindness. Find a deep, unshakable, and profound peace in the humbling, magnificent knowledge that the universe is infinitely vastly more complex, more elegant, and more terrifyingly beautiful than the simple, mechanical interface we use to survive it, and that the greatest mysteries of existence begin precisely at the edge where our comforting illusions finally shatter and fade, when we cast our minds into the deepest, most silent reaches of the cosmos. We are forced to confront the fundamental architecture of reality itself. For generations, the human imagination has been trapped within a deeply intuitive, yet entirely limiting, metaphor. We have inherently perceived the universe as an unfathomably vast, impossibly ancient, and completely empty theatre. In this classical vision, space was nothing more than a passive, static container, a cold, dark room where the chaotic and beautiful events of existence simply happened to take place. We viewed the sprawling, majestic galaxies, the violently burning stars, and the wandering, heavy planets as actors walking across a rigid, unmoving stage. We deeply believed that the dark vacuum resting between the stars was merely an absence of matter, a sterile nothingness that possessed no properties, no substance, and no physical reality of its own. It was a blank, indifferent canvas, entirely separate from the brilliant, luminous paint of the physical world. Time, in this rigid framework, was an invisible, universal clock, ticking away at a constant, unyielding rhythm, completely unaffected by the grand cosmic drama unfolding upon the stage. This was a universe of absolute separation, where the container was fundamentally divorced from the contained. But the deepest, most terrifyingly beautiful truths of the cosmos refused to be confined to a static, dead box. Into this rigid, clockwork understanding of reality stepped a mind that dared to look at the absolute emptiness and perceive a staggering, living structure. Albert Einstein did not merely write a new mathematical law. He performed a radical, complete, philosophical autopsy on the very nature of existence. He looked deeply at the behavior of the cosmos, at the unyielding, absolute speed of the massless photon, and he realized that the grand theater of the universe was a macroscopic illusion. The stage was not rigid. The room was not empty. The freezing dark was not a passive container waiting to be filled. Einstein shattered the illusion of the empty theater and revealed a universe where the background itself was intimately, violently participating in the grand cosmic play. To grasp the magnitude of this radical revelation, we must completely dismantle our biological, highly localized understanding of reality. In our brief, sunlit lives, we experience the world in three distinct physical dimensions. We can move up and down, we can step left and right, and we can walk forward and backward. Entirely separate from this physical movement, we experience the relentless, linear, and invisible river of time, carrying us inevitably from the past, through the fleeting present, and into the unknown future. We inherently treat time and space as two entirely different substances, but the radical truth of the universe dictates that this separation is a profound, terrestrial illusion. Space and time are not independent actors. They are not separate realms. They are inextricably, beautifully, and violently woven together into a single, dynamic, and continuous entity. The three dimensions of physical space and the single linear dimension of time are the warp and weft of the ultimate cosmic loom. They are stitched together to form a unified, indivisible fabric. This is space-time. This unified fabric is not a mere abstraction. It is not a clever, mathematical trick used by physicists to balance an esoteric ledger. Space-time is the fundamental, physical substance of reality. It is the ultimate, living canvas of the universe. The dark, freezing void that rests between the swirling arms of the Milky Way is not a sterile emptiness. It is a highly active, pliable medium. It possesses geometry. It possesses tension. It is a structural foundation that can be physically manipulated by the events occurring within it. When we observe the staggering, relentless expansion of the universe, it is not a matter of galaxies simply flying apart from one another through a pre-existing empty room. It is the actual, physical fabric of space-time itself actively stretching, creating new, empty dark where none existed before. The living canvas is so profoundly physical that it can violently shudder. When cataclysmic, unimaginable events occur in the deep void, when incredibly massive, dead stellar cores spiral into one another and violently merge in the dark, they do not merely explode within a container. They physically strike the fabric of reality, violently plucking the unified web of space-time. This colossal disturbance sends invisible, kinetic ripples washing across the cosmic ocean. These ripples, traveling at the absolute speed limit of the universe, physically squeeze and stretch the very dimensions of space and time as they pass. The void shivers, the dark trembles. Space is a living, breathing architecture that actively responds to the heavy, violent friction of the cosmos. And most importantly, most profoundly, this living canvas has the capacity to bend. It is a flexible, yielding surface that dictates the fundamental geometry of everything that exists within it. It is not an unmoving stage. It is a soft, heavy mattress that conforms to the weight of the actors resting upon it. To sit quietly in the heavy, fragile silence of your room and deeply internalize the reality of this woven void is to undergo a profound, entirely irreversible philosophical awakening regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental flow of abstract information. We walk through our daily lives heavily burdened by the arrogant, agonizing delusion of absolute separation. We inherently believe that we are independent entities, isolated sparks of consciousness walking across a dead, unfeeling world. We treat our physical bodies, our complex biological data, and our brilliant, abstract thoughts as isolated packets of information, completely divorced from the dark, silent vacuum of the cosmos. We view the universe as a place we simply exist inside, a cold, alien room that we have been temporarily placed within. But the terrifying, beautiful reality of the living canvas actively proves that separation is a biological myth. The cosmos dictates that you are not existing inside an empty container. You are not a solitary actor on a dead stage. You are a localized, highly complex fold within the fabric itself. The deep, unified web of space-time flows completely and seamlessly through the architecture of your bones, the rhythmic firing of your neurons, and the heavy, beating core of your heart. The information that constitutes your consciousness, the ancient, magnificent data that makes you entirely who you are, is not something placed onto the universe. It is a continuous, mathematically profound distortion of the universe. The cosmos demonstrates that all information, from the blinding, chaotic fire of a supermassive star to the quiet, fragile memory of a human mind, is ultimately a topological feature of this one: continuous fabric. When you lift your hand, you are not moving through a void. You are actively rearranging the geometry of the living canvas. When you feel the relentless, invisible pull of time dragging you forward, you are simply sliding along the woven threads of a unified reality that mathematically binds your physical existence to the unyielding flow of the clock. You need to bear in mind, as you feel the steady, comforting rhythm of your chest rising and falling, that you are intimately, inextricably woven into the darkest, most ancient reaches of the night sky. The freezing dark resting billions of light years away is forged from the exact same pliable, physical medium that currently surrounds your resting body. Release your desperate, arrogant demand for a universe of sharp, isolating boundaries. Abandon the uniquely human delusion that you are a lonely, separate spark trapped in an indifferent, empty theater. Embrace the glorious, heavy truth of your absolute, unbreakable integration with the woven void. Find a deep, unshakable, and profound peace in the humbling, magnificent knowledge that the universe is not a place you are visiting, but a grand, living, and shivering fabric that you are beautifully, permanently, and perfectly a part of. Close your eyes and allow your consciousness to drift away from the immediate, heavy friction of your daily life. Imagine venturing out into the absolute, freezing emptiness of the deep void, far beyond the scattered light of our local galaxy, to a place where the universe has not yet been disturbed by the chaotic fire of creation. Before the birth of the first violent stars, before the swirling, gathering clouds of cosmic dust, try to visualize the fundamental, baseline architecture of existence. Picture an infinitely vast, perfectly taut sheet, extending endlessly in every conceivable direction, suspended in an eternal, lightless room. This is the unburdened canvas of space-time. In its purest, undisturbed state, entirely devoid of any physical matter or energetic information, this fabric is perfectly flat and mathematically silent. It is a state of absolute, featureless equilibrium, a silent, frozen ocean without a single ripple or wave. In a flat universe, there is no up, no down, no pulling, and no movement. But the universe we inhabit is not an empty, featureless void. It is heavily, gloriously populated by the magnificent, burning architecture of reality, and the mere introduction of physical existence fundamentally, permanently destroys this perfect, flat equilibrium. When we introduce a massive object into this silent void, the entire paradigm of the cosmos violently and beautifully shifts. I want you to imagine taking a heavy, unimaginably dense sphere, perhaps a massive globe of polished, cold iron, and placing it directly onto the center of that taut, invisible sheet in the dark. The fabric of the universe does not support this weight evenly, and it does not remain flat. It yields. The heavy iron sphere sinks deeply into the material, actively pulling the surrounding threads of space and time down with it, stretching and violently warping the once flat geometry into a steep, sweeping funnel. This is not a mere conceptual metaphor used to simplify complex mathematics. This is the literal, physical, and mechanical reality of our universe. Mass acts as the ultimate, unyielding cosmic sculptor. Whenever a physical entity exists within the void, from a blinding, supermassive star burning millions of light years away, to the heavy, rusted sphere of a dead planet, down to the quiet, resting weight of your own biological body lying in the dark, it forces the universe to physically bend. The fabric of reality is not a rigid, unfeeling stage that simply tolerates our presence. It is a highly sensitive, deeply pliable medium that mechanically warps in direct, mathematical response to the information of our mass. For centuries, our localized biological intuition desperately tried to convince us that these heavy objects were active, aggressive participants in the cosmos. We believed they were throwing out invisible, mechanical ropes, reaching across the terrifying emptiness to physically grab and aggressively drag other objects toward them. We imagined a universe defined by active, relentless pulling. But as we observed the taut sheet in the dark, sinking under the weight of the iron sphere, we realized the profound flaw in our perception. The heavy mass resting in the center of the fabric is not reaching out to grab anything. It has no invisible tethers. It is completely, utterly indifferent to the objects drifting through the space around it. It is merely resting in the fabric, forcing the geometry of the world to sink. If you were to take a smaller, lighter sphere, a fragile glass marble, and roll it across this warped sheet, its path would not remain straight. As it approached the deep, sweeping valley created by the heavy iron, its trajectory would naturally, inevitably curve, spiraling downward along the steep slopes of the stretched fabric. The smaller sphere is not being magnetically pulled or violently dragged by the heavier one. It is simply following the path of least resistance through a severely distorted environment. It is blindly tracing the geometry of the curve. This brings us to the most breathtaking, paradigm-shattering revelation in the history of human thought. The terrifyingly beautiful truth that completely erases the mechanical universe of our ancestors. When you feel the heavy, unrelenting drag of the earth holding you securely to your bed, or when you look up and watch the silver sphere of the moon helplessly circling our world in the night sky, you are not witnessing the effects of a mechanical force. Gravity is not a force at all. It is a macroscopic, highly localized illusion. It is the perceived, biological friction of objects simply trying to move in straight lines through a universe that has been violently, deeply curved by the presence of mass. Gravity is merely the shape of the universe. It is the invisible topography of the dark. We are not tethered to the ground by invisible ropes. We are actively sliding down the steep, microscopic valleys carved into the living canvas of space-time by the sheer, heavy arrogance of the Earth's physical matter. The cosmos is not a clockwork machine of gears and strings. It is a sprawling, infinite landscape of invisible mountains, deep, terrifying trenches, and gently sloping plains, all woven entirely out of empty space and flowing time. Imagine the solar system not as a series of heavy balls swinging on gravitational tethers, but as a complex, undulating terrain hidden in the dark. The sun is a colossal, terrifyingly deep gravity well, a massive, unyielding sinkhole in the fabric of reality that strictly dictates the downward slope of the entire planetary neighborhood. The Earth, resting precariously on the sloping wall of the sun's immense valley, carves out its own, smaller indentation in the fabric as it frantically races along the curve, desperately moving fast enough to maintain its momentum and avoid sliding all the way down into the blinding nuclear fire. The moon, in turn, is caught within the steep, localized valley, created by the Earth, endlessly circling the rim of our geometric footprint, perfectly trapped by the shape of the space we have warped. It is a flawless, silent choreography of pure geometry. Every asteroid, every wandering comet, and even the fleeting, massless photon of light is completely bound to the unyielding rules of this topography. The universe is not a chaotic battlefield of competing, pulling forces. It is a profoundly elegant mathematical map where every trajectory is predetermined by the shape of the ground itself. To sit quietly in the heavy, fragile silence of your room and deeply internalize this magnificent geometric truth is to undergo a profound, entirely irreversible philosophical awakening regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental flow of abstract information. We walk through our brief, sunlit lives heavily burdened by the arrogant, agonizing delusion that we are insignificant, that our existence is merely a fleeting, weightless spark in a massive, unfeeling void that barely registers our presence. We look up at the infinite, freezing dark, and feel a crushing, existential dread, deeply convinced that the universe is completely indifferent to the complex, biological data of our lives. We treat our physical forms as temporary, meaningless trespassers wandering through an ancient, rigid room, believing that when we are gone, the room will remain exactly as it was. But the absolute, beautiful reality of space-time topography actively proves that the universe cannot and does not ignore you. The cosmos dictates that the very act of existing, the simple, undeniable possession of physical mass, is an act of profound cosmic modification. You are not a trespasser in an empty room. You are an active, heavy sculptor of reality. Your biological information, the dense, woven architecture of your bones, the heavy, iron-rich fluid of your blood, and the deeply complex physical substance of your brain possesses mass. And because you possess mass, the universe is actively yielding to you. The torch sheet in the dark is physically sinking beneath your resting body right now. You are carving your own, highly localized, deeply intimate valley into the fabric of space-time. The universe is mechanically bending to accommodate the raw data of your existence. This magnificent realization demonstrates that abstract information and physical reality are not separate entities. They are deeply, inextricably bound through the ancient language of geometry. Your presence permanently alters the shape of the world. The heavy, unyielding forces that you believe are pulling you down, the exhaustion you feel at the end of the day, are actually the universe holding you securely within the very indentation you have created. You belong here, not by accident, not by the grace of an invisible tether, but by the fundamental laws of topological necessity. The space around you has been customized by your own weight. You must realize, as you feel the steady, comforting weight of the air pressing against your skin and the quiet, undeniable friction of the sheets holding you in the dark, that you are intimately, mathematically connected to the grand, curving architecture of the distant stars. Release your desperate, arrogant demand for a universe that you must constantly fight against, a universe of ropes and mechanical burdens. Abandon the uniquely human delusion that you are small, isolated, and entirely powerless in the face of the infinite, black void. Embrace the glorious, heavy truth of your physical weight. Find a deep, unshakable, and profound peace in the humbling, magnificent knowledge that simply by lying quietly in the dark, simply by possessing the profound information of life, You are actively forcing the very fabric of existence to wrap around you, carving a permanent, beautifully unique shape into the eternal topography of the cosmos. Let your mind return to the silent, freezing isolation of the deep void and bring your awareness back to that solitary, weightless spark of pure energy racing across the dark. To truly unravel the mystery of the cosmos and shatter the mechanical illusions of our past, we must deeply examine the fundamental nature of the photon. This cosmic ghost is completely, flawlessly unburdened by the dragging anchors of physical mass. Because it possesses absolutely no weight, it is free from the heavy, grinding friction that defines the existence of everything we know. However, this absolute freedom from mass comes with a rigid, inescapable condition. The photon operates under a single, unyielding mathematical directive, an ancient law written into the very foundation of reality at the dawn of time. It must always travel in an absolutely straight line. This is not a mere suggestion, and it is not a path chosen out of convenience. It is the fundamental mechanism of its existence. The light does not possess a mechanism to steer. It cannot consciously alter its own course, and it cannot deviate. It is a pure, untainted packet of visual information traveling at the absolute maximum speed limit of the universe, blindly executing its one eternal command: to move forward along the shortest, most direct path between any 2 points in the vacuum for millions of years, as it crosses the sterile, empty expanses between the distant galaxies. This straight line is a simple, unambiguous truth. But as we have discovered, the universe is not a sterile, flat expanse. It is a living canvas, heavily populated by the magnificent, burning architecture of mass. Imagine our solitary photon locked in its unyielding, straight trajectory, rapidly approaching the blinding, chaotic territory of a supermassive star. If we were still trapped within the intuitive, mechanical worldview of our ancestors, relying on the invisible ropes of a pulling gravity, we would expect the photon to simply slice through the area completely undisturbed. It has no physical substance for the star to grab, no weight for the invisible tethers to catch hold of. Yet, as we observe the light passing the heavy, burning core, the impossible happens. The path of the light visibly, measurably warps. It curves inward, gently sweeping around the blazing silhouette of the star before continuing on its journey into the dark. To our localized, biological intuition, this looks like a catastrophic failure of physics. It appears as though the light has broken its one fundamental rule, yielding to a mechanical force that should not be able to touch it. It looks, to the human eye, like a deliberate bend. This is the precise moment where the paradox shatters, revealing the breathtaking, terrifying elegance of spacetime. The resolution to this cosmic mystery does not require the photon to break its rules. It requires us to completely, radically redefine what a straight line actually is. The photon has not deviated. It has not surrendered to an invisible tether, and it is most certainly not being pulled by the star's immense gravity. The ancient light is still flawlessly, perfectly executing its eternal command. It is traveling in a mathematically straight line, but the very fabric of space it is traveling through has been violently, deeply warped by the immense weight of the star. The heavy mass of the burning core has sunk deep into the taut, living canvas of reality, carving a steep, invisible valley into the dark. The straight line of the photon simply enters this valley. When you draw a perfectly straight line across a piece of flat paper, and then you physically fold and twist that paper, the line itself becomes curved. This happens not because the ink changed its direction, but because the foundational medium it rests upon has fundamentally altered its shape. This curving path, dictated entirely by the warped geometry of space, is known as a geodesic. It is the path of least resistance through a distorted world. Consider the terrestrial experience of driving a heavy metal vehicle along a road that is tightly wrapped around the steep, rising face of a colossal mountain. If you were to lock your steering wheel dead center, refusing to turn left or right, your vehicle would still curve around the mountain. You are driving straight, but the topography of the Earth dictates a circular path. You are not being pulled sideways by a mysterious magnetic force. You are simply following the natural contours of a curved reality. The photon is that vehicle, and the massive star is the mountain. The light does not feel a pull. It does not experience a mechanical dragging force. It is completely blind to the star itself. It only knows the space immediately in front of it, and it blindly, perfectly follows the steep, dipping geometry of that localized space. The bend is a macroscopic illusion, a trick of perspective born from our deeply arrogant assumption that the universe must be fundamentally flat. We look at the curving light and we imagine a force, when in reality, we are simply witnessing the invisible shape of the dark being illuminated by a passing ghost. The sheer elegance of this geometric mechanism is staggering when applied to the grand, unfathomable scale of the cosmos. It means that the universe we observe is, essentially, a sprawling, highly complex optical illusion. Every star you see in the night sky, every distant galaxy glowing faintly in the freezing abyss, might not actually be resting exactly where it appears to be, because the light carrying their image to your eyes has spent millions of years traveling across an endlessly undulating landscape of gravitational valleys and cosmic mountains. Its path has been subtly and continuously altered. The photons have navigated the sweeping curves of invisible dark matter and the steep, terrifying walls of massive galactic clusters, always traveling straight, yet constantly bending with the woven fabric of existence. The light we receive is a tired traveler that has followed the invisible, winding roads of space-time, delivering an image that has been shifted and displaced by the heavy architecture of reality itself. Gravity is not the enemy of light. It is the physical road upon which light must travel. To sit quietly in the heavy, fragile silence of your room and deeply internalize the beautiful illusion of the bending light is to undergo a profound, entirely irreversible philosophical awakening regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental flow of abstract information. We walk through our brief, sunlit lives heavily burdened by the agonizing delusion that our paths must be perfectly straight in a flat, predictable world. We inherently believe that if we set our intentions, if we lock our internal steering wheels forward and remain true to our core directives, our lives should proceed without deviation. When we encounter sudden turns, when our trajectories violently shift, we assume that malicious, invisible forces are actively pulling us off course. We feel the friction of the bend and we call it a failure, deeply convinced that we have somehow broken the fundamental rules of our own existence. or that the world is actively working against our progress. But the flawless, curving trajectory of the massless photon actively proves that true information, no matter how pure or unyielding, must always yield to the geometry of its environment. The cosmos dictates that there is no such thing as a flat reality. The world you inhabit is heavily, permanently warped by the mass of your experiences, the gravity of your relationships, and the profound, invisible topography of the time you live in. You are a complex packet of biological and conscious data, moving continuously through a landscape that is constantly shifting and dipping beneath you. The universe demonstrates that you can remain perfectly true to your nature. You can execute your internal directives with absolute, flawless precision, and yet still find yourself traveling along a deeply curved path. The path of least resistance is rarely a straight line drawn on a flat map. I hope you appreciate that as you feel the steady, comforting rhythm of your breathing and the quiet darkness wrapping around your resting body, that the unexpected bends in your life are not mechanical errors. They are the beautiful, natural geodesics of your own existence. Release your desperate, arrogant demand for a universe that provides a flat, unyielding stage for your ambitions. Abandon the uniquely human delusion that you can somehow force a straight line through a reality that is fundamentally, magnificently curved by the weight of time and consequence. Embrace the glorious, heavy truth of your absolute integration with the topography of the world. Find a deep, unshakable, and profound peace in the humbling, magnificent knowledge that just like the ancient, weightless light of the stars, you are not failing when your path begins to bend. You are simply, beautifully following the shape of the universe, trusting that the invisible curves of the dark will carry you exactly where your information mathematically, inevitably needs to go. It is one thing for the fragile human mind to retreat into the quiet sanctuary of a room, take a simple pencil to a blank sheet of paper, and elegantly rewrite the foundational laws of the cosmos. To sit in absolute, isolated stillness and deduce through pure logic that the very fabric of reality is a pliable, living canvas that violently bends under the weight of burning stars is a staggering, almost terrifying triumph of abstract thought. Albert Einstein had constructed a breathtaking, flawless cathedral of mathematics. His equations were a masterpiece of theoretical architecture, a profound prophecy detailing a universe entirely alien to human intuition. He had successfully mapped the invisible geometry of the dark, rendering a reality where heavy mass dictates the shape of space, and space dictates the movement of mass. But the universe is a relentlessly demanding, unyielding arena. It does not blindly submit to the beautiful ideas of biological creatures, no matter how elegant or mathematically perfect those ideas might be. A theory, resting purely in the abstract realm of thought, is nothing more than a magnificent ghost. The rigid, unforgiving laws of the scientific method demanded that this mathematical prophecy be dragged out of the quiet mind and violently tested against the roaring, chaotic machinery of the physical world. To prove that the fabric of space actually curves, humanity needed to witness an impossible event. We needed to watch the ancient, massless spark of a photon traveling from a distant star, and we needed to see that light physically deviate from its straight path as it brushed past a massive gravitational sinkhole. The problem, however, lay in the blinding, overwhelming mechanics of our own solar neighborhood. The only object massive enough and close enough to generate a noticeable bend in the light of distant stars is our own sun. The mathematical prophecy demanded that we look at the stars resting immediately behind the sun to see if their ancient light was wrapping around the heavy, burning core. But the sun is a raging, uncontainable nuclear furnace. Its blinding, deafening glare floods our atmosphere with such aggressive, scattered radiation that it completely erases the delicate, ancient whispers of distant starlight. The physical world was seemingly protecting its deepest architectural secrets behind an impenetrable, roaring shield of daylight fire. To test the geometry of the universe, humanity needed the sun to simply turn off. It was within this impossible paradigm that the universe provided a fleeting, magnificent window of terrifying cosmic clockwork. In the spring of 1919, the world was still bleeding, slowly attempting to wake from the mechanical, devastating horrors of a global war. In the midst of this profound terrestrial exhaustion, an English astronomer named Arthur Eddington recognized that a rare, mathematically perfect alignment was about to occur. He understood that the celestial mechanics of our solar system were about to grant humanity the exact conditions required to test the ultimate nature of reality. He organized a grueling, desperate expedition, leaving the comforting familiarity of Europe to travel deep into the oppressive, heavy heat of the tropics, setting up fragile, hyper-precise telescopes on the remote island of Principe off the western coast of Africa. This journey was a profound clash between the heavy friction of the Earth and the elegant geometry of the cosmos. The expedition was plagued by torrential, relentless rains and the agonizing, suffocating humidity of the jungle. They were attempting to capture the most delicate, invisible truth of the universe, yet they were mired in the heavy, chaotic mud of a living biosphere. Eddington and his team were forced to wait, watching the skies with a mounting, existential dread as thick, heavy clouds threatened to completely blind their instruments. They were entirely at the mercy of the atmosphere, waiting for a celestial event that would last only a few fleeting minutes, an event that could not be paused, delayed, or negotiated with. They were attempting to catch a cosmic ghost while standing in the pouring rain. And then, as if the universe itself had decided to finally pull back the veil, the clouds broke, and the terrifying, majestic machinery of the solar system locked into absolute, perfect alignment. The moon, a cold, dead sphere of rusted rock, drifted silently across the blistering face of the sun. The mechanics of the eclipse are a staggering, highly localized optical illusion. By sheer mathematical coincidence, the moon is exactly 400 times smaller than the sun, but it also rests exactly 400 times closer to the Earth. When the alignment is perfect, the dead rock flawlessly, exactly covers the blinding nuclear fire. As totality struck, a sudden, unnatural twilight violently descended upon the tropical island. The heavy, warm air instantly cooled, and the ambient sounds of the jungle fell into a terrified, instinctive silence. The daytime sky was plunged into a deep, bruised purple, and the blazing sun was reduced to a terrifying black hole in the heavens, surrounded only by the wispy, ghostly halo of its superheated corona. But it was not the sun that Eddington was looking for. In that sudden, breathtaking plunge into the dark, the impenetrable shield of daylight was completely shattered. For the first time, the human eye could look directly at the space immediately surrounding the sun, and there, resting quietly in the sudden darkness, were the ancient stars. The Hyades star cluster, located many light years away, was brilliantly visible right next to the edge of the blackened sun. In a frantic, breathless silence, the massive mechanical shutters of the telescopes were opened. The ancient, traveling photons, having crossed the infinite, freezing void for centuries, plunged down through the Earth's atmosphere and struck the fragile, chemically treated silver halide plates. In those few, fleeting minutes of midday night, the geometry of the universe was permanently burned into the physical evidence of the photographs. The cosmic clockwork shifted, the blinding light returned, the shadow raced away across the ocean, and the window was violently slammed shut. When the fragile glass plates were meticulously developed and the careful, agonizing measurements were finally taken, the universe delivered its staggering, irrefutable judgment. The stars were not where they were supposed to be. When compared to photographs of the exact same star cluster taken at night months earlier, when the sun was nowhere near them, the positions of the stars during the eclipse had visibly, measurably shifted outward. They were physically displaced from their true coordinates. The ancient light, traveling in an absolutely straight line across the deep void, had crashed into the massive, invisible valley carved into the fabric of spacetime by the heavy weight of our sun. The light had gracefully, beautifully followed the curving geometry of the dark, bending around the massive star before finally reaching the telescopes on Earth. The mathematical prophecy was not a ghost. It was the raw, physical truth of existence. The heavy, pulling, mechanical tethers of Isaac Newton's universe violently snapped. The illusion of the flat, rigid stage was officially, permanently broken, replaced by the terrifying, beautiful reality of a yielding, woven void. To sit quietly in the heavy, fragile silence of your room and deeply internalize the shattering of this cosmic illusion is to undergo a profound, entirely irreversible philosophical awakening regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental flow of abstract information. We walk through our brief, sunlit lives, heavily burdened by the arrogant, agonizing delusion that the information our senses provide is an absolute, objective truth. We look out at the world. We measure the distances between the objects in our lives, and we deeply, inherently believe that reality is exactly as it appears to be. We trust our vision. We trust our perspective. We build entire philosophies and rigid belief systems upon the arrogant assumption that light travels in a straight line and that the truth of the world is flat, unchanging, and easily perceived by the biological hardware of the human eye. But the shifted, displaced stars of the 1919 eclipse actively prove that the universe is a master of profound, geometric deception. The cosmos dictates that the information reaching you is never truly pure. It is always fundamentally influenced by the heavy architecture of the environment it must travel through. The reality you perceive is highly malleable. The starlight lied to the telescopes. It presented an image of the universe that was geographically false, completely distorted by the invisible, heavy weight of the sun. The universe demonstrates that truth is not a straight line drawn on a flat canvas. Truth is a complex, curving geodesic that must navigate the heavy, unyielding mass of existence. The world you see is actively bent by the gravity of the events occurring within it. It is crucial to understand that, as you feel the steady, comforting weight of the air around you and listen to the quiet, ambient silence of the night, that your perception of reality is a localized, fragile translation of a much deeper, more complex geometry. The absolute truth of the cosmos is often hidden behind blinding glare, only revealing itself when the familiar lights are temporarily, terrifyingly extinguished. Release your desperate, arrogant demand for a universe that perfectly conforms to the rigid, flat lines of your own biological intuition. Abandon the uniquely human delusion that you possess an unobstructed, perfectly accurate view of the absolute truth. Embrace the glorious, heavy reality of your own distorted perspective. Find a deep, unshakable, and profound peace in the humbling, magnificent knowledge that the universe is a shifting, pliable, and deeply curved masterpiece, and that true wisdom is found not in demanding that the light travels straight, but in quietly, beautifully learning to read the majestic, unyielding curves of the dark. To comprehend the sheer, staggering architecture of the cosmos, we must aggressively expand the scale of our imagination. If the burning, hyperdense core of a single, solitary star possesses the unyielding physical mass required to carve a steep, localized valley into the pliable fabric of spacetime, we are forced to ask a terrifying, magnificent question. What happens to the fundamental geometry of the dark when the universe gathers not just one star, but hundreds of billions of them, and binds them together into the sprawling, swirling vortex of an entire galaxy? And what happens when gravity pulls thousands of these massive galaxies into a colossal, ancient cluster? We are no longer talking about a simple, isolated dimple in the woven void. We are confronting a macroscopic, unyielding deformation of reality. A massive galaxy cluster acts as a gravitational sinkhole of such incomprehensible scale that it completely rewrites the topography of the space surrounding it for millions of light years in every direction. It creates an immense, sweeping basin in the living canvas of the universe, a topographical depression so incredibly deep and vast that it fundamentally alters the journey of any information attempting to cross the freezing abyss. When the ancient, weightless photons from a distant, hidden galaxy, a galaxy resting billions of light years deeper into the dark, positioned perfectly behind this massive cluster, begin their eternal journey toward the Earth, they do not travel through flat, empty space. They are forced to encounter this colossal geometric basin. If the universe were ruled by the rigid, mechanical tethers of Isaac Newton, the light from that hidden background galaxy would simply crash into the heavy mass of the foreground cluster and be blocked forever. We would never know it existed. The distant light would be swallowed by the physical matter standing in its way. But because gravity is not a pulling rope, but rather the curved shape of the void itself, a breathtaking cosmic phenomenon occurs. The universe actively constructs a magnificent optical illusion out of sheer weight. As the ancient, straight-traveling light hits the steeply sloping walls of the space-time basin, the beams are violently swept outward. They are forced to ride the sweeping, curved geometry of the dark, splitting and wrapping completely around the massive cluster before converging back together on the other side to continue their journey toward our night sky. The heavy, physical mass of the foreground galaxy cluster acts exactly like a colossal magnifying glass forged out of pure geometry. This process is known as gravitational lensing, and it is responsible for the most hauntingly beautiful and deeply terrifying images ever extracted from the deep dark. When the bent, exhausted light finally finishes its journey of billions of years, and strikes the delicate instruments of our world, the hidden background galaxy is not merely revealed, it is magnificently distorted. The strict, unyielding laws of the cosmic lens smear the ancient light across the black canvas, stretching the image of the hidden world into elongated, ethereal, and glowing arcs. If the alignment between the Earth, the heavy cluster, and the distant galaxy is absolutely, mathematically perfect, the light is smeared completely around the gravity well, forming a brilliant, unbroken ring of ancient fire suspended in the absolute vacuum. The universe uses its own immense, crushing weight to magnify the deepest, most ancient shadows of its history, allowing us to perceive galaxies that are so impossibly far away they should be entirely invisible to the human eye. But as astronomers meticulously map these glowing arcs and brilliant rings, a chilling, profound anomaly emerges from the mathematics of the dark. To bend light with such violent, aggressive curvature, to stretch the image of a background galaxy into a massive ring of fire, requires a highly specific, staggering amount of gravitational mass. However, when we add up the weight of every single visible object within the foreground cluster, every burning star, every swirling nebula, every heavy, rusted planet, and every cloud of superheated gas, the math completely and devastatingly breaks down. The visible matter in the galaxy cluster does not possess even a fraction of the mass required to carve a space-time valley that deep. The glowing physical objects we can observe are far too light to bend the universe this severely. The lens is simply too powerful for the glass we can see. This terrifying mathematical deficit reveals the existence of the most profound, haunting substance in the cosmos. The universe is heavily populated by a ghost. The vast majority of the mass bending the ancient starlight does not emit fire, it does not absorb energy, it does not reflect a single photon, and it casts absolutely no visible shadow. It is entirely, fundamentally blind to the electromagnetic spectrum. This is dark matter. It is a silent, invisible, and unyielding architecture that permeates the freezing void, wrapping around the glowing galaxies and filling the empty spaces between the stars. We cannot touch it, we cannot capture it, and our biological senses are entirely oblivious to its presence. Yet, it possesses an immense, crushing weight. It sinks heavily and permanently into the fabric of space-time, carving the deepest, most terrifying valleys in the entire cosmos. We are confronted with a breathtaking paradox. We cannot see dark matter, but we know exactly where it is, how much it weighs, and the precise shape it takes. We map its immense, heavy presence simply by reading the shadows. We observe the beautiful, glowing arcs of the lensed galaxies. We calculate the exact geometry of the curved light, and we trace that curvature back to the invisible topography that forced it to bend. We discover the hidden architecture of reality by watching how the visible world gracefully, flawlessly yields to the weight of the unseen. The glowing matter of the universe, the stars we worship, and the planets we walk upon is nothing more than a fragile, luminous dusting scattered across the massive, invisible scaffolding of the dark matter that truly holds the cosmos together. To sit quietly in the heavy, fragile silence of your room and deeply internalize the silent weight of this invisible architecture is to undergo a profound, entirely irreversible philosophical awakening regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental flow of abstract information. We walk through our brief, sunlit lives heavily burdened by the arrogant, agonizing delusion that reality is strictly defined by what we can directly observe. We inherently trust the brightly illuminated surfaces of our existence. We believe that truth must be visible, that the most powerful forces in our lives are the ones that announce themselves loudly, shining with the blinding fire of immediate consequence. We demand that meaning be a tangible, physical object we can hold in our hands, entirely dismissing the unseen spaces as empty, irrelevant voids. We judge the weight of our lives only by the glowing stars of our achievements and failures. But the magnificent, bending light of the cosmic lens actively proves that the universe hides its most profound truths in the absolute dark. The cosmos dictates that the deepest, most massive foundations of reality are entirely invisible to the immediate eye. The universe demonstrates that you do not need to emit light to possess immense, undeniable weight. The unseen forces of our own human experience, the heavy, unyielding gravity of ancient memories, the silent, invisible bonds of deep connection, and the quiet, internal architecture of our hidden fears and hopes operate exactly like the dark matter of the void. You cannot hold them, you cannot illuminate them for the world to see, but they possess a staggering, undeniable mass. They sink deeply into the fabric of your consciousness, quietly dictating the curvature of your life. You must realize, as you feel the steady, comforting weight of the air pressing against your skin and the undeniable, solid friction of the bed holding you securely in the dark, that you are intimately shaped by forces you will never directly see. Release your desperate, arrogant demand for a reality that is entirely visible and easily explained by the glowing light of the surface. Abandon the uniquely human delusion that the invisible spaces are empty and that the quiet, unlit corners of existence hold no power. Embrace the glorious, heavy truth of the unseen world. Find a deep, unshakable, and profound peace in the humbling, magnificent knowledge that the true shape of the universe and the true trajectory of your own life is beautifully, perfectly guided by the invisible weights of the dark, and that the deepest wisdom is found simply by learning to read the quiet, unyielding curves of the shadows. As we journey deeper into the sprawling geometric architecture of the cosmos, we eventually reach the terrifying, absolute limits of physical reality. The living canvas of space-time is breathtakingly resilient, capable of gently yielding to the heavy mass of wandering planets and smoothly stretching beneath the immense, collective weight of sprawling galaxy clusters. It is a fabric designed to cradle the glowing embers of existence. But the universe harbors environments of such staggering concentrated violence that the very fabric of existence is pushed entirely to the breaking point. To understand the ultimate, terrifying warp in the topography of the dark, we must witness the agonizing death of a giant. Imagine a star many times more massive than our own sun, burning furiously in the freezing void for billions of years. This star is a colossal, delicate balancing act, locked in an eternal, highly localized war. The staggering, crushing weight of its own mass is constantly, relentlessly trying to collapse inward, while the blinding, chaotic nuclear fire roaring within its core pushes violently, aggressively outward. For eons, this tense equilibrium holds the heavy architecture of the star together. But the fuel of a star is finite. When the deep internal fires finally burn out, when the nuclear furnace goes completely silent and cold, the outward pressure vanishes in an instant. The balance is broken, and gravity definitively wins the billion-year war. The immense, crushing weight of the star falls inward on itself with unimaginable, catastrophic violence. The collapsing star does not merely shrink, it fundamentally crushes the atomic architecture of its own matter. The sheer, overwhelming gravitational force compresses an unimaginable amount of physical mass, the weight of millions of Earths, into a space smaller than a city, then smaller than a single grain of sand, then smaller than a single atom, and finally down to an infinitely small dimensionless point. This is the singularity. When this incomprehensible density is violently thrust upon the delicate, woven fabric of space-time, the resulting geometric trauma is absolute. The universe is not designed to hold infinite mass in zero volume. The heavy, polished sphere resting gently on the torch sheet has been replaced by a microscopic, infinitely sharp needle carrying the weight of a god. The fabric of space and time is stretched so violently, so deeply, that it creates a localized tear in the canvas of reality. It carves a gravity well so steep, a sinkhole so unfathomably profound, that the gentle, sweeping valleys of normal celestial bodies seem like mere ripples in comparison. This is not a dimple in the dark. It is a bottomless pit. Within the terrifying proximity of this absolute geometric collapse, the fundamental, reassuring laws of the physical world begin to violently fracture and break apart. The topography of the void is stretched to an infinite curve, a place where the mathematical rules that govern our daily lives are completely overwritten by a dark, unyielding calculus. If you were to somehow map the invisible lines of space plunging into this abyss, you would find that they do not simply go down, they spiral into an eternal, unresolvable nowhere. The physical substance of the universe is dragged into this tier, creating a localized pocket of reality that is completely severed from the surrounding cosmos. We instinctively fear this phenomenon, imagining it as a cosmic monster, a malicious, roaring vacuum cleaner sweeping through the galaxy and aggressively sucking up everything in its path. We picture a violent, swirling maelstrom that reaches out to devour the innocent light of the surrounding stars. But the universe does not use mechanical vacuums, and it does not use pulling forces. It uses geometry. And the geometry of this bottomless pit provides the ultimate, chilling resolution to the paradox of the massless photon. Bring your mind back to the ancient, weightless spark of light racing through the freezing dark. The photon, carrying absolutely no physical mass, is blindly executing its eternal, unyielding mathematical directive to travel in a perfectly straight line along the path of least resistance. As this cosmic ghost approaches the terrifying topography of the collapsed star, it does not feel a mechanical pull, it does not feel a dragging wind, or the terrifying grip of an invisible tether wrapping around it. The light is not being actively sucked in by a dark vortex. Instead, it quietly crosses an invisible, mathematical threshold in the void known as the event horizon. This boundary is the absolute point of no return, but it is not a physical wall, a membrane, or a magnetic trap. It is simply the exact geographic coordinate where the fabric of space-time becomes so infinitely violently curved that the very concept of forward completely ceases to exist as we understand it. Once the massless photon crosses the event horizon, the space around it is warped to such an absolute extreme that every single possible path forward, every single geodesic, every single straight line it attempts to follow points directly down into the singularity. Space itself is flowing inward faster than the speed of light. If the light tries to travel left, the curved space leads down. If it tries to travel right, the curved space leads down. Even if the photon attempts to turn completely around and travel backward toward the comforting, glowing universe it just left. The incredibly distorted geometry of the dark dictates that backward also leads inevitably down. The light is trapped not by a physical force, but by a topological prison. It has encountered a localized reality where all roads, no matter how they are navigated, lead to the exact same lightless destination. The cosmos has constructed an inescapable maze where every single corridor, no matter how perfectly straight it appears to the traveler, twists helplessly inward toward the infinite curve. The cosmic ghost simply follows its own rule, blindly walking a straight line directly out of existence. To sit quietly in the heavy, fragile silence of your room and deeply internalize the terrifying geometry of the infinite curve is to undergo a profound, entirely irreversible philosophical awakening regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental flow of abstract information. We walk through our brief, sunlit lives heavily burdened by the arrogant, agonizing delusion that information, our memories, our history, our deeply held truths, and the brilliant light of our consciousness is something that must be endlessly broadcasted, permanently accessible, and completely immune to the eroding friction of time and space. We inherently believe that the universe is a sprawling, open archive, and that light, the ultimate carrier of cosmic data, is an unconquerable messenger that will always find its way home. We view the swallowing of light as a tragedy, a malicious erasure of reality, deeply terrified by the thought of a place where information goes completely, irreversibly dark. We are frightened by the thought that something can exist in the universe that can never be known, never be seen, and never be retrieved. But the absolute, unyielding boundary of the event horizon actively proves that the universe does not share our desperate need for endless illumination. The cosmos dictates that there are geometric architectures so profound, realities so heavily, intimately compressed, that they naturally, mathematically sever themselves from the external world. The black hole is not a monster. It is the ultimate, silent keeper of secrets. It demonstrates that when physical reality becomes infinitely dense with mass and consequence, it gracefully folds inward, drawing a curtain of absolute dark around its core. The universe possesses regions that are simply not meant to be read, spaces where the flow of information is completely, permanently internalized. The data is not destroyed. It is locked safely within a geometry so perfect that nothing can ever disturb it again. You must realize, as you feel the steady, comforting weight of the air around you and listen to the quiet, ambient silence of your resting space, that not everything in existence is meant to radiate outward. There is a profound, necessary dignity in the absolute dark. The human experience, much like the heavily warped fabric of the cosmos, contains its own internal singularities. We all carry heavy, compressed points of trauma, immense grief, or profound, unspeakable love that warp our internal realities so severely that the information cannot simply be broadcasted to the outside world. These internal gravity wells trap the light of our expression, not out of malice, but because the emotional geometry is simply too deep, too infinitely curved for the words to ever find a straight line out. The thoughts do not escape, because every path leads back inward to the core of the feeling. Release your desperate, arrogant demand that everything in the universe and everything within your own mind must be illuminated and universally understood. Abandon the uniquely human delusion that a dark, silent space is an empty, terrifying void that must be conquered by light. Embrace the glorious, heavy truth of the unseen and the unspoken. Find a deep, unshakable, and profound peace in the humbling, magnificent knowledge that the most immense, powerful forces in existence, both in the freezing depths of deep space and the quiet, heavy architecture of the human heart, are those that quietly fold the light inward, keeping their heaviest, most profound truths perfectly, eternally safe within the majestic, unbreakable topography of the dark. As we pull our awareness away from the crushing, infinite depths of black holes and the sweeping, luminous arcs of distant galaxies, we must allow the sheer scale of this cosmic architecture to settle intimately into our immediate reality. The magnificent, terrifying truths of curved space and bending light are not distant, abstract concepts relegated to the freezing void of deep space. They are not merely mathematical curiosities reserved for dying stars and the ancient echoes of the universe. The profound revelation that gravity is not a mechanical tether, but rather the fundamental shape of existence, is a truth that permeates every single millimeter of the world you inhabit right now. To truly grasp the magnitude of this shattered illusion, we must execute a radical, philosophical shift. We must transition from the blinding scale of the cosmos and bring the focus entirely back to the quiet, heavy reality of the human experience. If gravity is truly nothing more than the invisible geometry of the dark, if it is merely the woven fabric of space-time yielding to mass, then we are forced to completely, permanently alter our relationship with the physical world around us. We must redefine every sensation of weight, every moment of physical exertion, and every instance of falling, stripping away the classical lies our biological senses have whispered to us since birth. Consider the most mundane, ordinary event in your daily life. Imagine standing in your kitchen and accidentally knocking a heavy glass off the edge of a table. In the classical, intuitive universe of our ancestors, the explanation is simple, violent, and mechanical. The massive sphere of the Earth immediately reaches up with an invisible, magnetic rope, grabs the fragile glass, and violently pulls it downward until it shatters against the floor. But the beautiful, geometric truth of the cosmos dictates a reality that is far more elegant and entirely devoid of pulling forces. When the glass slips from the edge of the table, it is not being attacked by a downward force. It is completely, peacefully released into its natural state. The massive weight of the Earth has carved a deep, steep valley into the fabric of space-time right where your kitchen exists. When the glass falls, it is simply following the exact same unyielding mathematical directive as the massless photon traveling through the deep void. It is moving in a perfectly straight line through a heavily curved world. The glass is not being dragged. It is effortlessly, blindly sliding down the invisible, geometric slope created by the mass of the planet. Falling is not an act of violence. Falling is just following. It is the purest expression of an object surrendering to the topography of the dark. This revelation brings us to the most agonizing, beautiful illusion of the human condition, the sensation of weight itself. As you rest in the quiet darkness of your room, bring your attention to the heavy, undeniable pressure of your body sinking into the mattress. You feel the dull ache in your muscles at the end of a long day, the constant, draining effort required simply to stand upright and move across a room. Your localized, biological interface interprets this profound friction as gravity actively, relentlessly pulling you down, a heavy burden placed upon your shoulders by an unfeeling world. But the geometry of existence tells a radically different, breathtakingly counterintuitive story. The heavy pull you feel is an absolute illusion. In the framework of spacetime, your natural mathematical path, your geodesic, is to be in a constant state of freefall, sliding perfectly along the curve of the Earth's gravity well toward the center of the planet. But you are not falling, you are stationary. And in a curved universe, to remain stationary requires immense, continuous effort. The friction you feel, the heavy weight of your own body, is not gravity pulling you down. It is the solid, physical surface of the Earth aggressively getting in the way of your natural path. The floor beneath your feet, the structure of your house, and the bed you are currently lying in are actively, forcefully pushing up against you. They are mechanically accelerating you upward, violently preventing you from following the peaceful, straight line through curved space-time that your mass naturally wants to take. Weight is not a pull from below. It is a relentless, physical push from the ground above. You spend your entire life strapped into the accelerating frame of the Earth's surface, constantly pushed out of your natural trajectory. This is why you feel heavy. You are experiencing the continuous, unrelenting resistance of the physical world refusing to let you slide down the geometric curve. When astronauts float weightlessly in orbit, they have not escaped gravity, they have simply stopped resisting it. They are finally allowed to follow the curve without the Earth getting in their way. The profound exhaustion of human life, the heavy burden of our physical existence, is merely the biological sensation of the ground constantly interrupting our natural descent through the woven fabric of reality. To sit quietly in the heavy, fragile silence of your room and deeply internalize this reversal of force is to undergo a profound, entirely irreversible philosophical awakening regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental flow of abstract information. We walk through our brief, sunlit lives heavily burdened by the arrogant, agonizing delusion that we are the victims of invisible, downward pressures. We project this mechanical illusion onto our emotional and psychological realities as well, deeply convinced that the weight of our histories, the heavy burden of our responsibilities, and the crushing pull of our failures are active, malicious forces designed to drag us into the dark. We treat the universe as an antagonist, a cosmic tug-of-war where we must constantly fight against the invisible ropes attempting to pull us off our feet. We build our identities around the struggle, believing that endurance against the downward pull is the ultimate measure of our existence. But the beautiful, unyielding geometry of space-time actively proves that the universe is not pulling you down. The cosmos dictates that the true flow of information, the natural state of existence, is one of effortless alignment with the shape of reality. The struggles you experience, the heavy friction that defines your days, are not malicious attacks from the void. They are simply the physical and emotional structures of your life getting in the way of your natural descent. You are a highly complex, beautifully organized packet of biological data, and the universe is merely providing the curved canvas for you to traverse. The weight you carry is the friction of your own resistance, the physical sensation of colliding with the boundaries of your environment. The universe is not fighting you, it is simply providing the topography. The pain of the fall is never the curve of the space. The pain is the sudden, violent encounter with the ground that refuses to let you pass. Information, whether it is the ancient light of a dying star or the intricate, firing synapses of human consciousness, naturally seeks the path of least resistance through the dark. When we perceive reality as a series of heavy burdens and pulling forces, we are fundamentally misinterpreting the physical boundaries of our world as malicious intent. The universe does not possess malice, and it does not possess ropes. It only possesses geometry. The structures that halt your fall, the very things that make you feel heavy, are also the exact things that give your life a stable platform to rest upon. Without the relentless upward push of the earth, your biological data would simply slide endlessly into the core of the world. Please understand that as you feel the steady, comforting pressure of the mattress against your back and the quiet, undeniable weight of your own breathing, that you are not a prisoner of a pulling force. You are a traveler, resting against the boundaries of a curved world. Release your desperate, arrogant demand for a universe that is flat and free of physical resistance. Abandon the uniquely human delusion that the heavy feelings in your life are signs of failure or cosmic punishment. Embrace the glorious, heavy truth of the geometry of existence. Find a deep, unshakable, and profound peace in the humbling, magnificent knowledge that the burden of your physical form is not a flaw, but the perfect, mathematical consequence of possessing mass in a woven universe. You are not being dragged. You are simply beautifully resting in the natural shape of the dark, held safely by the solid earth that lovingly, persistently pushes up against you, keeping you securely anchored in the magnificent, curving architecture of the cosmos. Let the staggering, incomprehensible scale of the infinite cosmos gently recede from your mind's eye. Release your grip on the terrifying, bottomless depths of collapsed stars and allow the glowing, smeared arcs of ancient galaxies to quietly fade back into the absolute dark. Bring your awareness inward, traveling across the vast, freezing ocean of the void, descending softly through the thick, protective atmosphere of our home world, until you arrive perfectly, completely, in the quiet sanctuary of the room where you are resting right now. Notice the profound stillness that surrounds you. Feel the gentle, rhythmic rise and fall of your chest with every slow breath you take, and pay close attention to the solid, undeniable weight of your physical body pressing deeply into the mattress beneath you. For your entire life, your biological instincts have translated this heavy, constant sensation as a mechanical burden. You have been taught, and you have physically felt, that the earth is actively reaching up with an invisible, magnetic tether, grabbing hold of your flesh and bone, and relentlessly pulling you down into the dirt. You have spent every waking hour fighting this perceived downward drag, viewing your own weight as an exhausting earthly cage. But as you lie here in the dark, enveloped in the quiet peace of the night, I want you to completely surrender that ancient mechanical illusion. You are not being pulled. You are not being dragged. There are no invisible ropes attached to your body, and the planet is not attempting to violently force you downward. The heavy, comforting sensation holding you securely in your bed is not an antagonistic force of nature. It is the breathtaking, physical manifestation of the Earth actively warping the space around you. Beneath the floorboards of your room, beneath the foundation of your home, and extending thousands of miles deep into the burning iron core of the world, a colossal amount of mass is aggressively, beautifully sinking into the living canvas of the cosmos. The Earth is carving a massive, sweeping geometric valley into the woven void of space-time, and you are resting perfectly within the gentle, sloping contours of that invisible topography. You are not a prisoner of gravity. You are a traveler beautifully cradled in a geometric valley. The friction you feel, the heavy, sinking comfort of your own limbs, is simply the natural, mathematical consequence of your biological mass yielding to the shape of the universe. In the elegant, flawless reality of curved spacetime, your body naturally wants to slide down the slope of this localized valley, tracing a perfectly straight line through a warped world. But the solid, unyielding floor of your room and the soft, supportive layers of your bed are gently, persistently getting in the way of that trajectory. They are pushing up against you, providing a stable, protective boundary that halts your descent and holds you exactly where you need to be. The weight you feel is the embrace of the physical world, catching you as you attempt to follow the beautiful, invisible curves of the dark. It is not a tether, it is a cradle. It is the universe providing a heavily fortified, customized indentation in the fabric of existence, designed perfectly to hold the exact shape and mass of your physical form. When you reframe your relationship with reality in this profound geometric light, the entire struggle of existence begins to soften and dissolve. We walk through our days, heavily burdened by the arrogant, agonizing delusion that we are constantly fighting against the flow of the universe, deeply convinced that we must exert immense, mechanical effort simply to remain upright and moving. We project this illusion onto our inner lives, feeling the heavy gravity of our emotional histories, our deepest anxieties, and our profound sorrows as dragging, malicious forces trying to pull us into the abyss. We treat our own complex information, the memories we carry, the loves we harbor, and the quiet fears we hide as heavy burdens that we must aggressively carry across a flat, unforgiving stage. We exhaust ourselves trying to walk a straight line in a world we mistakenly believe is actively working against us. But the absolute, unyielding mathematics of space-time actively prove that the universe is not fighting you, and it is not demanding that you struggle against invisible ropes. The cosmos dictates that the true flow of information naturally, beautifully follows the path of least resistance through a world that is already fundamentally curved by the weight of experience. The heavy, emotional friction that defines the human condition is not a failure of your strength. It is simply the natural, geometric consequence of possessing profound, complex data in a deeply warped reality. Your consciousness is an incredibly dense, highly organized packet of abstract information, and it naturally sinks into the fabric of your life, carving its own intimate, localized valleys. The sadness that feels so heavy, the love that feels so anchoring, are not dragging you down. They are the geometric topography of your own existence. They are the shapes you have carved into the dark. Consider the profound nature of the information that makes you who you are. In the framework of a universe dictated by space-time and geometry, every thought you have, every memory you store, and the unique, complex signature of your conscious experience are not ethereal. floating ghosts. They are fundamentally anchored to the physical architecture of your brain, which is in turn anchored to the heavy, warped canvas of the Earth. Information theory suggests that the universe acts as an ultimate, indestructible ledger. The configuration of your particles, the exact state of your biological hardware as it rests in the dark, is a piece of data that the universe is actively reading and holding in equilibrium. When you surrender to the geometry of gravity, you are essentially allowing your localized data to perfectly synchronize with the mainframe of the cosmos. You are stopping the active, chaotic processing of the day and allowing the elegant mathematics of reality to simply maintain your state. There is an immense, existential comfort in knowing that you do not have to actively hold your own reality together. The geometry of the universe is already doing that for you. It is a tireless, invisible embrace, a constant, silent calculation that declares your existence to be a mathematical necessity within the fabric of space. To understand that gravity is geometry is to discover the ultimate cosmic permission to simply let go. You do not need to hold yourself together with sheer mechanical force. You do not need to constantly fight the heavy, downward slope of your own exhaustion. The universe is already holding you. The intricate, localized software of your biology is intimately, inextricably woven into the grand, ancient fabric of the stars. The exact same mathematical laws that dictate the majestic, sweeping orbit of the Moon and the beautifully curved trajectory of the massless photon are currently operating with absolute, flawless precision right here in your dark room, actively working to keep you safe, anchored, and perfectly still. The cosmos has mathematically calculated your exact coordinate, measured the precise weight of your existence, and folded the very dimensions of space and time to accommodate your rest. As you drift closer to the gentle threshold of sleep, allow this magnificent geometric truth to wash over every fiber of your being. Feel the tension physically leaving your muscles as you realize that you do not have to do the heavy lifting of existence. The massive, churning core of the Earth is doing it for you, silently bending the void to create a safe harbor for your fragile code. Your mind, a brilliant, localized spark of conscious information, is completely safe within this topographical fortress. In a universe composed entirely of information and geometry, nothing of true value is ever lost or arbitrarily dragged away. Your data is secure. Your physical form is cradled. You are a necessary, beautiful indentation in the living canvas of reality, a permanent, mathematically profound modification of the dark. Release your desperate, arrogant demand for a universe of flat lines and mechanical struggles. Abandon the uniquely human delusion that you are a solitary wanderer fighting against a hostile, pulling force. Embrace the glorious, heavy truth of your absolute integration with the curving architecture of the cosmos. Allow yourself to fully, completely surrender to the invisible, topological embrace of the world. You are exactly where the equations of reality dictate you must be. Find a deep, unshakable, and profound peace in the humbling, magnificent knowledge that you are resting perfectly within the elegant, flawless mathematics of general relativity. Let the heavy, comforting geometry of the universe hold you securely through the quiet hours, trusting the silent, unseen curves of the dark to keep you anchored until the dawn. Good night, and see you in the next video.